Well, praise the Lord, everybody, and welcome to Lighthouse for Jesus Tuesday night Bible study. Thank God for all of you who have joined us tonight. We're going to get right into it. Last week, we read the last verses 47 through 54, before we stopped, and but I did not discuss those verses. Those verses, after the counting of the men of Israel to go to war, beginning at verse 47, God begins to tell Moses about the appointing of the Levites. And we know that we saw a lot of the things concerning the Levites in the books of Exodus and Leviticus, and they were consecrated. But now, as we go through the Bible, we find how God progressively reveals things to us. That's why it's important to read all of it so that you can connect it and understand the story, because the Bible is a story. First of all, about Jesus Christ, all the way from the beginning, and about mankind. Okay, so verses 47 through 54, which we've already read in Numbers 1, we know that the verses prior to this was a count of potential soldiers. And I would also like to say, before I forget, this is still the series in the wilderness, and the title of this portion is still Count Me In Part 2. Okay, we're still counting. We will be doing some kind of counting and arranging all the way through chapter 4, I believe. But the tribe of Levi was not counted with the other tribes because they had their own separate census. They were not counted because Levi did not go to war. Their special responsibility to God was to perform the priestly duties of Israel. So we see in this a very simple concept, and that is, there are some things spiritually that can't or shouldn't be counted with other things. Some things have to be counted differently in the spiritual realm. Taking inventory is fine. Sometimes it's even a necessary first step in organizing so that you can have victory and take hold of God's promises. But taking inventory must always be done with the understanding that some of the important factors, as it is with the Levites in Israel, that everything can't be counted, everything can't be compared, because in the spirit, they are not the same. In all of our organizing, and today, churches are really fond of saying they have great administrative skills. And again, I say, all of that is fine and good. But here we see that in Moses organizing and in Moses administrating, he's doing what God says. He's not doing any of this on his own. He's doing what God says. So let us not forget that. in all of our doings, don't forget what the Spirit has to say. So these orders were given according to the plan that God revealed. And excuse me, in this chapter, I'm sorry, in chapter 2 of Numbers, we will see that God will order their how they are to be camped around the tabernacle. And it will be marked by a standard or a flag or a banner, but it was all according to God. Now, the Levites had been chosen by God to be over the tabernacle, and everything that was associated with the tabernacle. They were chosen by God to be the ministers of the tabernacle. In the arrangement of the camp of the tribes of Israel, the Levites were those that were immediately surrounding the tabernacle. They had to camp. This is what is being said in verses 47 through 54. In 51, it says, and when the tabernacle set it for, well, 53, but the Levites shall pitch round about the tabernacle of testimony, that there be no wrath upon the congregation of the children of Israel, and the Levites shall keep the charge of the tabernacle of testimony. Okay, so those camped nearest to the tabernacle were the Levites. Anyone from the other tribes of Israel had to go through the camp of the Levites to get to the tabernacle. Now, some will say, well, I'm an Israelite too. Of course, you are an Israelite, but you cannot get to the tabernacle without going through the Levites. You are Israel, but you are not the Levites. The tabernacle had to be the center of the lives of all of Israel. It had to be the center. But the Levites had to live closer to it than anyone. So with that those extra privileges of being closer to the presence of God, because that is what the tabernacle was. It was the presence of God. With that, the Levites also had added responsibilities. They were to transport, erect, and guard the tabernacle. They had to guard the tabernacle. Guarded from what? Ordinary Israelites, ordinary laymen, ordinary congregational members from approaching the presence of God unprepared or unclean. As I said over and over, these things that we are studying, we know that we don't expect to be zapped with fire from heaven if we go on the pulpit and we know we're not worthy. But the principle of that is still the same. You are unclean, you're taking a chance that the wrath of God would come upon not just you, the whole congregation. So this is what Israel had to face. Even when we get to, well, it'll be some years. When we get to the Temple of Solomon and the Tabernacle of David, which comes before the Temple of Solomon, there will be guards. The Levites would be guards. We call them ushers. So if approached wrongfully, The drastic measure of God's wrath would be death. So it shows us today the seriousness of approaching God in reverent fear when he is in the midst. So we say that we are a people who dwell in the midst of the presence of God. With that, we should walk in reverent fear, in the sense of trying our best to be what he expects of us in his presence. Let's read Hebrews 12. Okay, Hebrews 12, verses 28 and 29 says, wherefore we receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved or shaken, let us have grace, whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear, for our God is a consuming fire. Serving God with reverence and godly fear in the midst of grace. And some may think that worship and warfare are unrelated. But in God's economy, they go together. One of the major themes of Revelation is God's warfare against evil on earth and his receiving worship in heaven. Worship is a powerful weapon against the devil. We know that in Chronicles. We are given a great example of that, which I'm not going to get into tonight. But worship is a powerful weapon against the devil. So while the army is doing its fighting, the worshipers are doing their battle as well. Warring in the spirit. Unless the people of God are right with the Lord in their worship, they can't face their enemies and defeat them. So it was the responsibility of the Levites to make sure that that was done correctly. Psalms 149 and 6 says, hmm, 149 and 6 says, let the high praises of God be in their mouth and a two-edged sword in their hand. And that is to execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishments upon the people. Praising and sword, also the word of God. Fight, our weapons. So it says that they did, I have this other part that I didn't do. It said that they did all that the Lord had commanded Moses. They did what Moses said, God said. So we learn from this chapter, first chapter, Numbers, that God counts things. He counts the stars. He has a name for every star. Let's read something about that as well. Psalms 147 and 4. Psalms 147 and 4 says, he telleth or counteth the number of the stars. He called them all by their names. Men try to name the stars. God already named them. And he knows how many there are because he made them. Then we go to Isaiah 40 and 26 says, lift up your eyes on high and behold who have created these things, that bringeth out their host by number. he calleth them all by names, by the greatness of his might. For that he is strong in power, not one faileth. Wow. He bringeth out their host by number. He counts and he has names. God even knows the hairs on your head. Matthew 10 and 30. I have always thought that was powerful, even before I was saved, because my mama would say that all the time. And I would just think about trying to sit down and count the hairs on maybe Trula and Ann's head. But anyway, Matthew 10 and 30 says, but the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Only God can do that. So he counts things, counts our money too. He knows how much we have. He knows how much we hide. He knows how much we spend. He knows how, he knows. Okay, so beginning with Numbers chapter 2. As we said last week, Israel had been on this journey for more than a year. Heretofore, or up to this time, they camped just about any way they wanted to. But now, getting ready to, as they thought, to enter the promised land, God is getting them to take the next step in organization. What is the organization what is the first step in that? Ordering themselves, putting order among themselves. That great mob of people that came out of Egypt have got to become a responsible nation. So the tribal marching and camping positions were set, the duties of Levi defined, and a system of trumpet calls set to signal when they were to assemble, when they were to depart, when they were to stop, what were the holy days. And they learned that it's only wise to move at God's direction. God's people need to know that, and they need to have order and they need to have discipline. 1 Corinthians 14, 33 and 40. 1 Corinthians 14, 33 and 40 says, for God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches of the saints. And 40 says, let all things be done decently and in order. So in this ordering that he's doing, there's a sense of the orderliness that we find in Genesis 1, as he created the heavens and the earth and everything that fills them with beauty and order and purpose and wonder. That is what he wants of his people. When others look at us, he wants them to see order and beauty and purpose and wonder. The center of that order was the tabernacle itself. The tribes were going to arrange themselves to the east, south, west, and north in relation to the tabernacle, and each tribe's position was determined by the Lord. They did not pick where they were going to go. They did not pull lots, cast lots. They did not have a discussion. They did not have a business meeting. They heard from the Lord. So everything that they were doing was centered around God himself. So, Sister Tiffany, if you could read for me verses 1 through 9. Numbers 2.
And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, Every man of the children of Israel shall pitch by his standard with the ensign of their father's house. Far off about the tabernacle of the congregation shall they pitch. And the east side toward the rising of the sun shall they of the standard of the camp of Judah pitch throughout their armies. And Nahshon, the son of Amminadab, shall be captain of the children of Judah. And his host and those that were numbered of them were 14,600. And those that do pitch next unto him shall be of the tribe of Issachar. And Nathaniel, the son of Zuar, shall be captain of the children of Issachar. And his host and those that were numbered thereof were 54,400. Then the tribe of Zebulun, and Eliab the son of Helon shall be the captain of the children of Zebulun. And his host and those that were numbered thereof were 57,400. All that were numbered in the camp of Judah were 100,000 and 80,000 and 6,400 throughout their armies. These shall first set forth.
That's all the way to, okay, all right. So when it says, well, we see here that God is telling Moses and Aaron how the Levites are supposed to be set up. Now, he says some distance out of reverence to God. They still had to, even though they were Levites, they had to be a certain distance from the tabernacle. Couldn't get too close. Let's see, Joshua 3 and 4 says, yet there shall be a space between you and it, meaning the tabernacle, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Come not near unto it, that ye may know the way by which ye must go, for ye have not passed this way heretofore. He wanted space between, when they were crossing the Jordan, he wanted space between the Ark of the Covenant and the Levites, the rest of them who were coming after. So there was always to be a distance. In arranging the tribes, God started with the east side. He said toward the rising of the sun. The front was the east. The front of the tabernacle was the east. Judah, the tribe of Judah, has the position of honor. They camped foremost. They camped toward the entrance of the tabernacle. It's fitting that the lion should lead the way. This order even in their marching, showed the principality that should continue till Shiloh comes. Here, Judah was also a type of Christ, who is the captain of the Lord's host, as is said in Joshua 5 and 14. Joshua 5 and 14 says, and he said, nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did worship and said unto him, what saith my Lord unto his servant? When Joshua saw the angel of the Lord, the captain of the host, and he is also the captain of our salvation. Hebrews 2 and 10. Hope I'm not going too fast. Hebrews 2 and 10. Wherefore, I was grieved with that generation and said, they do always err in their, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm in 3, 2 and 10. For it became him, for whom are all things, and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons unto glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. So he's not only the captain of the host, he's captain of our salvation. And he does go before his heavenly armies, as we see in Revelation 12 and 7. Revelation 12 and 7 says, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. And he is the captain of the host there as well. So Judah, which means praise, was first, and they were the closest to the tabernacle itself. Next to them were the tribes of Issachar and Zebulun. All of these, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, they were the youngest sons of Leah. And they were all, even though they had their own banner or standard, the three of them, the three of those tribes, which would be called a company, they all had the lion or the flag of Judah as their standard. It is believed through Jewish tradition that the tribe of Judah had the standard of a lion, that Reuben had the standard of a man, Ephraim had the standard of an ox, and Dan had the standard of an eagle. Now, why is that important? Let's go to Ezekiel 1 and 10. Ezekiel 1 and 10 says, as for the likeness of their faces, they four had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side, and they four had the face of an ox on the left side. They four also had the face of an eagle. Praise God. Do you see the connection here? Ezekiel's visions of God's glory. And what he saw was what Israel used as standards in the wilderness. Their standards. Also, Revelation 4 and 7 says, Revelation 4 and 7 says, and the first beast was like a lion, and the second beast like a calf. Baby oxen are sometimes called calves. And the third beast had a face as a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle, all the way to the book of Revelation. These standards are very important, and God is showing himself. He's showing himself to them, even though they didn't even know what he was showing them. And he's showing himself to us little by little. That's why we need the whole book. And God recognized a specifically called leader, Nashon, for the tribe of Judah, and for each of the tribes that followed. We have already seen, I believe, or maybe it's in the next study, because I have been a little ahead of myself, that Nashon, I think we talked about him last week. I'm not sure. I can't remember that he is mentioned in the genealogy of Christ. But the order and organization that God called Israel to embrace required leadership. Those leaders were recognized by God and respected by the people. You have to be recognized by God and respected by the people. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to lead. The total number of available soldiers on the eastward tribes, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The total number came to 186,400. That number is important as well. So since the entrance to the tabernacle was there, it would seem that it would be important to have the largest number of soldiers protecting it, but that really isn't why. And we're going to talk more about that later. There was an order to the camp, the camp. There was an order when they marched. They were to move in an orderly fashion, an army. So these eastward tribes, they were the first to break camps. Now, verses 10 through 16, we read to 9. Sister Tiffany read that for us. We're not going to read verses 10 through 16. Basically, it's giving us the same information, only about the south side. What it's saying is that on the south side of the tabernacle, Reuben was the first tribe, and he was set closest to the tabernacle on the south side. And Simeon and Gad followed Reuben. The Reuben and Simeon are Leah's two oldest sons, and Gad was the son of her maid, which made him her son. The southern tribes, or those on the southern side, used the standard of Reuben, which was the image of a man. The total number of available soldiers on the south side was 151,450. We remember the eastern side was 186,400. Southern side, 151,450. In verse 17, I will read that. Then the tabernacle of the congregation shall set forward with the camp of the Levites in the midst of the camp. As they encamp, so shall they set forward, every man in his place by their standards. So the priestly tribe was in the middle of the camps, closest to the tabernacle and surrounded by the other tribes. What they're saying here is that in giving us the set pattern of the other tribes, south, east, west, north, the tabernacle was in the middle of all of them, and the Levites were encamped around the four sides. In chapter 3, I believe we're going to count the Levites. But right now, he's just telling us where they are camped. So there's a progressive manifestation of the presence of God in the midst of the people. So first he was on Mount Sinai. Then he comes to the tent. Then he goes into the tent in the midst of the camp. And one day, he would reveal himself through the incarnation in the midst of his people. Let's go to John. Let's see what he's telling us about him being in the midst of us. John 1, which we are also familiar with, but we want to make sure that we see what God is saying for those who may not know, or we just need to be reminded. John 1 and 14. And the word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth, in the midst of us. And also Matthew 1 and 23, which says, behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted is God with us. God with us. What is so wonderful is now God is not just with us, God is in us, progressively revealing himself, beginning in the Old Testament. And verse 23 of Matthew 1 that we just read, it is a quote from Isaiah, because he also saw that. He dwells with his people. He will dwell in his people. On a day still to come, there'll be the full realization of the presence of God dwelling in the midst of his people in the New Jerusalem. Let's go to Revelation 21. Revelation 21 and 1 through 4. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, and this is the John that wrote the Gospel of John that we just read, that the word became flesh and dwelt among us. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men. The what is with men? The tabernacle of God that he gave us as a symbol, the natural tabernacle in the Old Testament, where he dwelt with his people. But now it says that tabernacle of God, him, he, Jesus Christ, that word that was made flesh will be with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. Lord, whatever you're crying about, people, whatever you're crying about, right? And I know the saints have had to shed some tears, but he's going to wipe away all tears from our eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. What he is showing us here, when we read these chapters with all of these numbers and all of these names that seemingly mean absolutely nothing, means so much to us, what he is telling us. He dwelt with them there in the midst, in the center. Is he the center of our lives today? Or is he on the outskirts? Are we camped about him where he told us to be? In verses 18 through 24. This is the west side. Ephraim was first on that portion, on the west side, and then Manasseh and Benjamin. So Ephraim and Manasseh were the sons of Joseph, and then there was Benjamin. So these are the sons of Rachel, the descendants of Rachel. And their standard was an ox. The total number of soldiers, available among them was 108,100. Again, remember that number. Then, verses 25 through 31. This is how they were camped on the north side. The tribe of Dan was first, and then there were Asher and Naphtali. So the two sons of Rachel's maid, Bilhah, and one son of Leah's maid, who was Zilpah. And they all marched under the standard of Dan, the eagle. And their total number was 157,600. Again, remember the number. When we get to verses 32 and 34, 32 through 34. There it gives us the ones who, let me see, 32. Let me read that. And Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, shall be chief over the chief of the Levites and have the oversight of them that keep the charge of, I'm in the, I turned too many pages there. Okay, 32 and 34. These are those which were numbered of the children of Israel by the house of their fathers. All those that were numbered of the camps throughout their host were 600,000 and 3,550. But the Levites were not numbered among the children of Israel as the Lord commanded Moses. And the children of Israel did according to all that the Lord commanded Moses. So they pitched by their standards, and so they set forward everyone after their families according to the house of their fathers. The total number of all of the soldiers, 603,550. Remember that the Levites are not counted among them. Why does God give us all of those numbers? Psalms 40:7. Then said I, lo, I come. In the volume of the book, it is written of me. I already said that God is giving so much in the arrangement of the camps. Remember that Israel was arranged in 4 companies: east, west, north, and south. And at the center of the camp were the Levites. So, Sister Tiffany, do you have that picture? Okay. Those of you who were with us when we were studying the setting, the setting up of the tabernacle, or the making of the vessels, it was at the very beginning, I believe, of that I showed this picture. And this is where I believe that God revealed this to me, because there are some pictures where you will see the encampment of Israel, and it's just a square. If you will look at that picture, though, you see that the number of the tribes on the east had the largest amount of people. That would be Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Now, you will see inside, well, you see the pillar of cloud coming out of the tabernacle, and around them, you see the Levites camped. You see Moses and Aaron and their families, which is the priesthood. Then you see the rest of the Levites, Kohath, Merari, and Gershon. They are there. Now, there's a certain amount of Levites. I think when you count them all, it's going to be around 22,000. There's only so far that they can spread. And in lining up in order, if you would put Issachar and Zebulun on each side of Judah, what you would have is not just an eastern encampment, and it is so with the other sides as well. If they would go straight across and the other tribes would go straight across, you can see that they would not just be camped on north, south, east, west, but they would be camped northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. There is nothing said about any of that, only straight east, straight north, straight south, straight west. And according to the numbers, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun had the most in their count. That would be at the entrance to the tabernacle, which would be at the bottom, or the long part, which would form the cross. They have to go long instead of wide to be east, not northeast or southeast, just east. The western tribes would be at the short top of the cross because they had the least amount of people. Are we getting this? So the west is the short top of the cross. The southern and the northern tribes had almost an equal amount of soldiers when they were counted. They were almost the same. If you guys wrote these down, you will see that according to the numbers, once they camped, they were in the form of a cross. Now, do we read this anywhere that they knew this? No. But in retrospect, when we study it, we can see what God saw from heaven, from where he looked at him. Huh. He saw the cross. Oh. Guess who else saw? Let's go to Numbers 23 and 9. 23 and 9 says, "For from the top of the rocks I see him, and from the hills I behold him. Lo, the people shall dwell alone and shall not be reckoned among the nations." And 24 and 5 of Numbers says, "How goodly are thy tents, O Jacob, and thy tabernacles, O Israel. From the top of a mountain, the top of a hill, whatever, Balaam, when he looked down, when he was trying to curse Israel, he could not do it. What he looked down upon was the cross. And all he could do was bless them. I believe that, I know that God wants us to see these things, that he was giving his people and that he's giving us so we will know that he was speaking to his people. He was speaking all those years, hundreds, thousands of years ago. So, what do we learn here? God is a God of order. It's not that order and organization are requirements for progress or victory in the Christian life, but they are progress in our life when we become orderly. Because God is God of order, which we read. God always moves, even behind the scenes when we don't see it, through organization. And God orders things according to his wisdom, not our wisdom. In the arrangement of those tribes, he didn't place them the way they thought they should be placed. He didn't ask their advice. He didn't do it according to what was most convenient. When he has order, he has his reasons, and it may not always make sense to us. And when we resist God's organization or order, it comes from a root of selfishness in us, of wanting to do things our way instead of God's way. Everything was positioned in relationship to the presence of God among them, the tabernacle. That is how our lives should be. Everything should be positioned in relationship to the presence of God in us and in our midst. God did not describe where the tribe of Judah was in relation to the tribe of Dan. His reference point was always himself, where Judah was in relation or in relationship to him. People get into a lot of trouble in their relationship with God because they position and measure themselves according to other people instead of to God. I'm going to say that again. People get in trouble in their walk with God because they position themselves and measure themselves in reference to other people instead of to God. God should be our focus, not other people. God's order is never just made up on a whim, always after a heavenly pattern that he has for us. And sometimes we don't understand it, but that is not a requirement that we understand. Israel's order is an illustration of what God's church ought to be in this world. A pilgrim people following the Lord with his presence leading the way. This should also tell us that every person in the church has a God-ordained, God-appointed place as a member of the body. When he puts you in the body, he puts you there to serve. First of all, every believer has a gift. Everybody has a gift, and everyone is there to serve. The exercise of that gift is your reasonable service, and it is also the basis for obtaining your reward from the Lord. And it's very, very important for us to realize that we shouldn't try to fill somebody else's place in the camp. Judah couldn't push Ephraim out of the way and say, I want to be here instead. No. It will put everything out of order. That means that the person that you've pushed out of the way is not in place, and where you're supposed to be is not in place. So we have to find our place. He counts all of us. He knows where we belong. We need to ask ourselves the question, are we where he planted us? Are you where he planted you? Or have you moved out of place? You got a little itchy, got a little, Once someone was born into a tribe, they couldn't say, I wanna, if I was Judah now, no, I think I want to be Ephraim. I think I want to be Zebulon. I think I want to be Gad. Once they were born into a tribe, once they were born again, they couldn't decide to change tribes, even though all those tribes were Israel. They were all Israelites, but you had to stay where you were born. Oh, glory. In order to be counted, you had to stay where you were born. Thank you, Jesus. You see, God has so much for us in this book, in the most unexpected places. If we read it with prayer, he will reveal it to us. If we move all of our carnal thoughts and preconceived notions out of the way, he will show you so much. He will reveal so much to you. And everything will be beneficial to the body as a whole. Remember, you're being counted. And if you move out of place, you can't be counted. Are there any questions or comments?